Elevated trains. A common build style for making a train route. They're cheap to make, easier to maintain, and you don't have to worry about the aroma of one smelly homeless person. New York City is a great example of elevated trains. Did you know that there is at least one elevated train station in all 5 boroughs? Yes, even Staten Island. But did you also know that New York City used to have a lot more than what there currently is? Yes, there were a lot. And in today's video, we'll be talking about 2 of the first iterations of this, being the Lexington Avenue Elevated and the Myrtle Avenue Elevated lines of Brooklyn. In this video, I will discuss the rise, fall, and remnants of the Myrtle and Lexington Avenue lines. So without further ado, let's get on to the video. The first elevated line in Brooklyn was the Lexington Avenue Elevated, which opened on May 13, 1885 from Washington Street, York Street, adjacent to the Brooklyn Bridge, to Gates Avenue and Broadway in Bed-Stuy. The line opened with 14 stops, which are as follows. Washington York Streets being the first stop and the westernmost on the line, Bridge Street, Navy Street, Cumberland Street, Washington Avenue, Myrtle Avenue, DeKalb Avenue, Green Avenue, Franklin Avenue, Nostrand Avenue, Tompkins Avenue, Sumner Avenue, now called Marcus Garvey Boulevard, Reed Avenue, now called Malcolm X Boulevard, and finally Gates Avenue and Broadway. Out of all these stations, the only one that remains today in service is Gates Avenue, which is now 140 years old. Throughout 1885, the line went through 4 more extensions. One in June to Manhattan Beach Crossing, now known as Broadway Junction. One in September to Alabama Avenue, just south of the East New York MTA bus depot, and one in November on the other end of the line to Fulton Ferry. There was one last one in December to Van Sicklen Avenue, where it would stay for 8 years. Moving on, 3 years later, in April of 1888, the Myrtle Avenue Elevated line opened from Adams Street, now Brooklyn Bridge Boulevard or Borum Place, yet some signs still reflect the Adams Street name, to Vanderbilt Avenue, while the Washington Avenue station was still under construction. Trains that started at Adams Street would go up the Lexington Avenue Elevated to Van Sicklen Avenue, where they would terminate. Although trains would not stop at the Myrtle Avenue station if they served the Lexington Avenue line due to the stop being directly above Myrtle Avenue, their next stop would be DeKalb Avenue. But before the opening of Washington Avenue in 1888, the Myrtle Avenue Elevated would be extended 1 stop north from Adams Street to Sands Street. In 1889, many changes were made to the Lexington Avenue and Myrtle Avenue lines. On April 27, 1889, the Myrtle Avenue Elevated had opened from Washington Avenue to Broadway, making stops at Grand Avenue, Franklin Avenue, Nostrand Avenue, Tompkins Avenue, Sumner Avenue, and finally Broadway, now known to riders as Myrtle Avenue Broadway. This would be followed by the closing of the Lexington Avenue Elevated over Park Avenue. All Lexington Avenue elevated trains would now run on Myrtle Avenue after Navy Street. Trains would still serve the portion over to Bridge York Street and Washington York Street, as well as Fulton Ferry. Later in 1889, the Myrtle Avenue line would be extended to Wyckoff Avenue, now known as Myrtle Avenue, Wyckoff Avenues, making 3 stops at Evergreen Avenue, now closed, Central Avenue, and Knickerbocker Avenue. For the next few years, the Brooklyn Rapid Transit Company will be focused on other projects, such as the 5th Avenue Elevated, the acquisition of the Brighton Line, and the acquisition of the West End Railroad. In 1893, the Lexington Avenue Elevated would be extended to Cypress Hills. This would be the last extension that was put under the Lexington Avenue elevated's name, as the rest eastward would be labeled as the Jamaica Line. This extension saw the line stopping at Cleveland Avenue, now Cleveland Street, Norwood Avenue, Crescent Street, and Cypress Hills. However, the station we now know today is not the original one, as the current station resides on Jamaica Avenue and the former station resided on Crescent Street. After this, there wouldn't be any major work on the Lexington Avenue line until its closure, and any other extensions would be the Jamaica line, although Lexington Avenue elevated trains would run all the way to 168th Street in later years. In June of 1898, the last major change of the 19th century, the Myrtle Avenue elevated would be extended to Park Row in the Civic Center district of Manhattan via the Brooklyn Bridge, using the former cable car right-of-way that had been used since the bridge's opening. In 1899, the Brooklyn Elevated Railroad had fallen and the Brooklyn Rapid Transit Company, or BRT, had taken over, and the BRT had some big plans. One of these changes was the electrification project of the entire BRT network after the elimination of the Lexington Avenue line to Fulton Ferry and its entire branch off of the Myrtle Avenue line at Navy Street in April of 1904. Before 1903, all BRT train routes had used steam dummies, which consisted of one small steam locomotive at one end and typically a cab car at the other end that would be used to move and stop the train. In 1906, the Myrtle Avenue line would be extended to Metropolitan Avenue from Myrtle Wyckoff Avenues via the Lutheran Cemetery Railroad line, which now runs under the current-day M route and was proposed for the Ridgewood Busway in the MTA's capital plan. The Myrtle Avenue line would use the station for a while and not go north of it, despite the tracks allowing them to go much further. In 1914, the dual contract between the BRT and IRT began, which came with a change in style for the stations, along with the third track project on most lines. This would see a service increase on most lines with the ability to run express, but the middle track on Myrtle Avenue, which got added in 1915, would only be used for layup trains and never in revenue service. This middle track ran between the former Evergreen Avenue station, just east of the Myrtle Broadway station, all the way up to Seneca Avenue. But this middle track had been the reason that the Evergreen Avenue station would close, along with its close proximity to Myrtle Avenue and Central Avenue. With this, the Myrtle Avenue line would actually now be extended to Metropolitan Avenue, running on its own elevated right-of-way, not on the street. The current Metropolitan Avenue station, which is the one that was built in 1915, is located approximately 100 feet west of the former station, which is now where the current IBX line is planned to run and serve. Between the years of 1917 and 1918, the Lexington Avenue line trains were extended 3 different times. The first to 111th Street, the second to 121st Street, and the last one to 168th Street, Jamaica, although this was now labeled under the Jamaica Avenue line. From this point on, nothing would happen to any of the lines. The platforms would get extended from 3 cars to 6 cars in the 1920s, and in the early 1930s be extended to 8 cars. During off-peak times, trains would run anywhere between 4 to 6 cars depending on what was needed for service. On March 5th, 1944, the Lexington Avenue and Myrtle Avenue elevated lines had closed between Park Row, Manhattan, and Bridge J Street in Brooklyn due to the trains becoming too heavy for the bridge and a faster, more convenient service under the East Rivers via free transfer at Bridge J Street. On October 13th, 1950, the Lexington Avenue line had closed between the Myrtle Avenue and Grand Avenue station to the Gate Avenue station and was subsequently removed in later years. sometime around 1953 to 1954, although that date is unknown. In 1967, with the opening of the Christie Street connection, the entire subway system had gotten lettered. The Myrtle Avenue line had got lettered MJ, standing for MJ, which was the western terminal of the line. Although this line had gotten lettered semi-shortly in 1969, the entire line would see the end of service and in 1971 be torn down. The last remaining portion of the original line still stands near the Myrtle Avenue Broadway section and the trestle there is the only remnants of the line that once ran. The current Myrtle Avenue elevated line still runs service between Myrtle Avenue Broadway and Metropolitan Avenue, using today's M route between Middle Village, Metropolitan Avenue, and Forest Hills. The line runs 8-car trains on weekdays during rush hour and the middays, and during the overnight and weekends runs 4-car trains and a shortened route that ends at Essex Street in Manhattan. All trains do start from Middle Village, Metropolitan Avenue, despite where they go south of that. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe, as I hope to make this a full series. Anyways, that's it from me, and I'll see you all in the next video.